Thank you for your support and thank you for tuning into our stories. Some are fiction and some are based on a true event. We would really appreciate it if you could like this video, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for a new story every day. This is a story about a mother's love after death, fleeing from the Communist Party of Laos. Before we start, hit like and subscribe. The night the village went silent. The first time Moua heard her dead mother speak, she was hiding inside a hole beneath the roots of a fallen tree, with her little brother shaking beside her and a starving tiger breathing just outside the leaves. She was only 12 years old, but by then, childhood had already been taken from her. Pao was 9, too young to understand war, but old enough to understand that nobody was coming back for them. They had no rice, no blanket, no father, no map, and no idea whether Thailand was 1 mountain away or 100. Outside the hole, the tiger dragged its claws through the wet dirt. Inside, Pao pressed both hands over his mouth, trying not to cry, because C had told him that sound could kill them. Then, from the dark jungle behind a tiger, a woman whispered, soft and close, as if her lips were beside C's ear. "Do not turn around unless I tell you." C knew that voice. It was her mother, my Moua. But her mother had been lying dead on the trail since sunrise. A few days before the horror, before the river, before the ghosts, before the mountains learned their names, the Moua family lived in a hidden Hmong village deep in the jungles of Laos. The village had no real road, only narrow footpaths through bamboo, banana trees, and steep green ridges. Their home stood on the edge of the village, with chickens roaming, crowing new hatched chicks, smoke curling from cooking fires, and children running barefoot through the evening mist. Vang Moua was 31, thin from years of fighting and hiding, but still strong, still watchful. He was the kind of father who listened before he spoke, and who slept lightly, even when the house was quiet. His wife, Mai, was 29, beautiful in a gentle way that made people lower their voices around her. She tied her hair carefully, even on hard days, and when she sang the folklore rhythms while grinding rice, the children nearby would stop playing just to listen. Their daughter, C, was 12, careful, sharp-eyed, already learning to carry more than a child should carry. Pao, her younger brother, was 9, brave only when someone was watching. And little Yer, the youngest, was 3, still small enough to fall asleep with his fingers tangled in my shirt. For weeks, rumors had moved through the village like smoke. The Americans were leaving. The fighting was changing. The men who had helped them would be hunted. Families were disappearing from nearby villages, and at night, flashes of fire lit the far mountains. Then one evening, Chu Tao came to Vang's doorway, wet from rain, his face pale in the lantern light. He did not greet them. He only said, "We leave tonight." I looked at Vang, and Vang did not ask why. That was how C knew the village was already gone, even though the houses were still standing. No one lit a cooking fire. No one said goodbye loudly. The Moua family packed only what they could carry: a little rice, dried meat, salt wrapped in cloth, one small knife, one blanket, 2 silver coins, and an embroidered sash I tied around C's waist. "Keep this on you," I whispered. C touched the sash and asked, "Why?" I smiled, but her eyes were wet. "So I can find you." C thought her mother meant in the dark. She did not know I meant after death. By moonrise, 20 people slipped out of the village together: the Moua family, 2 Thao families, 1 Xiong family, and a few elders who leaned on sticks as they walked. They carried food for 5 days, even though everyone knew Thailand was much farther than 5 days away. Behind them, the village disappeared into the jungle. No dogs barked. No babies cried. Even the insects seemed to understand that sound could give the living away. They traveled only at night, because night was dangerous, but daylight was worse. During the day, the families hid beneath leaves, inside gullies, under rock ledges, wherever the jungle would close over them and make them invisible. They slept in pieces, 1 hour here, a few minutes there, always waking to the snap of a branch or the distant cough of gunfire. At night, they walked until their legs trembled. The mountains rose one after another, dark and endless. Every time they climbed to the top of one ridge, another ridge waited beyond it, higher, colder, and covered in mist. Yer cried for water, then for food, then for home. I fed him cold grains of rice from her palm and told him they were almost safe, even though her own stomach had been empty since morning. Pao walked beside C, clutching the edge of her sleeve. He tried not to complain, because he had seen the way Vang looked when someone cried too loudly. But by the third night, his feet were swollen, and his voice became small. "I'm scared," Pao whispered. Mai stopped and knelt in front of him. Her face was tired, but her hands were warm when she touched his cheeks. "Good," she said softly. "Fear keeps your feet awake." Pao sniffed and shook his head. "I don't want my feet awake. I want to sleep." Mai gave him the kind of smile that mothers give when they are trying not to break. "Then walk until Thailand, my son. You can sleep there." On the fourth night, the first gunfire cracked through the valley below them. Not at them, not yet, but close enough that everyone dropped to the ground. Flashes blinked between the trees like lightning coming from the earth. Men shouted somewhere in the darkness. A baby began to cry, and her mother pressed her face into a blanket so quickly that she felt sick. Vang crawled back to Mai, mud on his hands and fear in his eyes. "We move now," he whispered. "No trail. Straight uphill." Mai glanced toward the elders. "The old ones cannot climb fast." Vang swallowed hard. "Then we carry who we can." They climbed through the dark, grabbing roots, slipping in mud, tearing their palms on stone. She helped Pao up one steep bank, then another. Mai carried Yer until her legs shook. Vang moved back and forth, lifting the elders, pulling children, listening to the valley below. Then she heard footsteps behind them. Not the running steps of soldiers, not the careful steps of family. These were slow, patient footsteps. Step, step, step. They followed even when the group stopped moving. She turned her head, but Mai's hand closed around her shoulder. "Do not look behind us at night," Mai whispered. "Why?" she asked. "Because not everything that follows wants to be seen." She thought her mother meant soldiers, but the footsteps continued after the gunfire faded. They continued when everyone held their breath. And then, somewhere behind the trees, a woman began to hum. The song was soft, almost loving. Pao looked up at Mai, his eyes wide. "Mama, are you humming?" Mai's face went pale no. The humming stopped. Then, from the black trees behind them, a voice answered in Mai's exact tone. "No." Nobody moved for several breaths. Chu Tao raised one shaking hand and whispered a prayer to the ancestors, to the spirits of the jungle, to anything that might still listen to the living. Vang leaned close to Si and Pao. "Whatever you hear behind us," he said, "you keep walking. If it calls your name, you keep walking. If it sounds like me, you keep walking." Si wanted to ask how something could sound like him if he was still beside her. But before she could speak, the footsteps started again. Step, step, step. This time they sounded closer. By the fifth day, the rice was almost gone. The adults no longer pretended there was enough. They gave the smallest children a few grains at a time, and when the children slept, the grown-ups drank water and told each other they were not hungry. The elders walked slower. Pao's lips cracked. Yer stopped asking for home and only leaned against Mai's shoulder with empty eyes. Near sunset, they found an abandoned rice field between two slopes. The stalks were still standing in patches, yellow and heavy, bending under the weight of grain. The small storage hut leaned near the edge of the field, its door hanging open. There were no chickens, no voices, no smoke from cooking fires. Whoever had lived there had left in a hurry, had not left by choice. Thao and Xiong stared at the rice like a starving man staring at a miracle. "We take some," he whispered. "Just enough for the children." Thao shook his head. "This place is not empty." Thao looked around, angry and afraid. "I see no one." "That is what worries me," Chu said. The wind moved through the rice, and for a moment, she thought she heard people whispering from inside the stalks. Mai tightened her grip around her, while Vang studied the tree line. "Take only what fits in your hands," Vang finally said. "Nothing more." Quickly, they moved into the field, bent low, hands shaking as they gathered rice. Si held open a cloth sack while Pao pulled at the stalks. Mai stood near them, Yer on her hip, watching the jungle instead of the grain. Then a bird burst out of the trees. Everyone froze. A second later, the mountain exploded with gunfire. The sound tore the world apart. People screamed. Rice scattered into mud. Someone shouted for the children to run. Vang's voice cut through everything, sharp and desperate. "Split up, go downhill, do not stop." Everything became broken pieces after that. Mai's hand leaving C's shoulder, Pao grabbing C's wrist. You're crying from somewhere behind them, and Vang lifting her into his arms. The Thao family scattering through smoke and the Xiong family disappearing into the trees. C did not think she ran. Pao ran with her, his small hand locked around her wrist so tightly it hurt. Branches cut their faces. Roots grabbed at their ankles. They slid down one hillside, climbed another, fell into a creek, then crawled out shaking and soaked. Behind them, people screamed names. Then C heard her mom. C, go. C then turned. Through smoke and rain, she saw her mother standing at the edge of the field. Ma was not running. She was looking straight at her daughter, one hand raised, pointing into the darkness. Go, Ma cried. Take Pao and go. For one breath, C saw her mother clearly. Her hair was loose. Her face was wet. Her eyes held so much fear and so much love that C felt something tear open inside her. Then smoke swallowed mine. C ran until her lungs burned. She and Pao crossed two hillsides in the dark. They crawled under thorns, stumbled through wet grass, and finally collapsed beneath a tree with roots twisted like old bones. The gunfire had faded. No footsteps followed, no voices called. Only the jungle remained, black and breathing around them. Pao pressed himself against C and whispered, "Where's Mom?" C looked into the dark behind them, hoping, praying, listening. "She's behind us," C said. "Where is Dad? He has your and he'll find us." "How?" C opened her mouth, but nothing came out. So she held Pao and lied again, because sometimes love has nothing else to give. "They're coming," she whispered. "They're coming, Pao. They're coming," but no one came. All night, Pao cried against her sleeve. C cried too, silently, because she was the older one now, and the older one was not allowed to fall apart where the younger one could see. Near dawn, C woke to the smell of smoke. A woman stood between the trees with her back turned. Her hair hung long and wet. Her feet did not touch the mud. For one impossible second, C thought it was her mother. "Kunia?" "Mom," she whispered. The woman slowly turned. It was not her mother. Her face was gray and swollen, as if she had drowned in a river far away. Her mouth opened too wide, and from inside it came the same soft humming they had heard in the mountains. C clamped one hand over Pao's eyes. Then their mother's real voice whispered behind her. "C, do not answer the dead who do not know your name." The gray woman vanished into mist. C turned around, but no one was there. Only the embroidered sash around her waist had come loose, fluttering east toward the sunrise, though the wind was blowing the other way. When morning came, C made the worst decision of her life. She went back. Pao begged her not to. He grabbed her arm with both hands and shook his head so hard his hair fell across his eyes. "They will still be there," he whispered. "Maybe Father is hurt," C said. "Maybe the soldiers are there, but we will stay low. C, please." But C had heard her mother call her name in the dark, and some part of her still believed Ma was alive, hiding somewhere, waiting for them. So they followed broken branches, crushed leaves, and muddy footprints back across the hills. Near the abandoned rice field, the air changed. It smelled of smoke, wet earth, and something C would remember for the rest of her life. Flies buzzed low over the grass. The field was quiet now, but not peaceful. C told Pao to stay behind a tree. He refused to let go of her shirt. Together they looked. The families who had left the village with them were scattered through the field and along the edge of the trees. Chu Tao's walking stick lay broken in the mud. Cao Xiong's cloth sack was torn open, the rice spilled out and trampled. The story does not need to say what war had done to them. Some sites should remain covered, even in memory. Then C saw her mother. Ma lay near the rice stalks, one arm stretched toward the trail where C and Pao had escaped. Her face was turned slightly upward, and rain had washed the smoke from her cheeks. She looked almost asleep, except that C knew sleep did not make mothers stop breathing. Pao made a sound so small it barely became a word. "Nia, Nia, Mom, Mother." C wanted to run to her, to throw herself beside her, to shake her awake and beg her to stand. But the sash around C's waist pulled tight. Not caught on a branch, not twisted in her clothes. Pulled, like an invisible hand had grabbed it from behind. C stopped. Near Mai's body, a boot print was slowly filling with rainwater, fresh. Soldiers were still nearby. C covered Pao's mouth before he could cry out and dragged him backward into the trees. Only when the field disappeared behind mist did she let him breathe. Pao collapsed against a trunk, shaking. "Mom is dead," he said. C stared east, where the sky was beginning to brighten. "Yes, what do we do?" "We go to the Mekong River, and we need to cross it into Thailand." "How do you know where it is?" said Pao. C touched the sash. "Mom said the sun rises where the river waits." Pao wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Mom is dead." C looked at him, and something older than 12 years old looked out through her eyes. "Then we listen better." For the next 3 days, C and Pao followed the sunrise. They moved through bamboo and fog, over ridges and into valleys where the air smelled of old ash. They ate sour leaves, scraped roots with a small knife, and drank from streams after C watched to make sure nothing dead floated upstream. At night, they hid wherever they could, under fallen trees, behind stones, inside the corners of abandoned huts. The villages they passed were not empty in a normal way. Cooking pots sat over cold ashes. Clothes hung on bamboo walls. A child's wooden toy lay beside a doorway. In one house, bowls had been placed for a meal no one had eaten. Pao stood in the doorway and whispered, "Where did they go?" "Same place we're going," C said. "Did they make it?" The house creaked. From the back room, something answered, "No." Pao screamed. C grabbed his hand and ran, while the empty house filled with whispers, not one voice, but many. Children, old women, men calling names, all of them speaking over one another from the walls. And beneath all those voices, their mother's voice rose sharp and clear. "Run, C." That was when C understood the haunting was changing. Their mother was no longer only a whisper behind them. She was walking with them, watching over them. After that, I protected them in ways C could not explain. When soldiers moved close, fog rolled down from the hills so thick that C could not see her own hands. The soldiers' voices passed only a few steps away, confused and angry, while C and Pao crouched beneath leaves, holding their breath. When Pao wandered toward a trail marked with fresh boot prints, a dead branch snapped from a tree and fell across his path. When hunger made C dizzy and she reached for wild fruits, she heard her mother click her tongue exactly the way she had in life. "Not that," I whispered. They began to understand the rules. Their mother could warn them, hide them, and stand between them and danger. But she could not carry them. She could not feed them. She could not let them see her face. And when the sun was high, she seemed far away, as if daylight pulled her back toward the world of the dead. Noon became the worst time. At noon, the jungle felt too bright and too empty. At noon, the old spirits moved closest. One afternoon, Pao heard Yer crying from beyond a line of bamboo. He ran before C could stop him, calling their baby brother's name. C caught him by the collar and pulled him back just as the crying changed into laughter, low and wrong, coming from something crouched behind the bamboo with white fingers curled around the stalks. Pao sobbed into C's shoulder. "It sounded like Yer," he said. C held him tightly. "I know. Why would it do that?" "Because it wanted you to follow." That night, rain trapped them near a dry creek bed. C found a hollow beneath the roots of a fallen tree. She pushed Pao inside first, then crawled in after him. With shaking hands, she dragged branches and leaves across the opening until it looked like part of the forest floor. Pao curled against her in the dark. "I'm hungry," he whispered. "Sleep. I can't." "Then pretend." "Will Mom and Dad come?" C listened. The jungle was too quiet. Even the rain seemed afraid to touch the ground. "I think she's already here," C said. Then they heard the growl. It rolled through the trees, deep and heavy, a sound that made the bones inside C's chest feel loose. The tiger stepped out of the creek bed. Its ribs moved beneath striped skin, and its mouth hung open as it tested the rain for scent. It was thin, hungry, and patient. The worst kind of hungry thing is the one that knows food is close. It came to the hollow slowly. Its paws made almost no sound. Pao trembled so hard C had to hold his shoulders down. The tiger lowered its head to the leaves covering the entrance, and its breath pushed through the cracks, hot and rotten with old meat. Its claws scraped the dirt twice. The leaves pressed inward. Pao's breath broke. "Nia, mother," he whispered. The tiger stopped. Outside the hole, someone was standing up between the children and the animal. C could not see her fully, but through a small gap between the leaves, she saw the faint outline of bare feet in the mud. Her mother's feet, standing firm. The tiger backed away, then roared so loudly that dirt fell from the roots above them. "Do not move," my whispered. The tiger struck the entrance. The whole tree shuddered. Pao buried his face in C's chest. C stared at the leaves as they pulled tight, not inward, but outward, as if invisible hands were holding the door shut from the other side. The fierce tiger struck again, growling for inch canine's teeth. Mai's voice strained in the dark. "Do not move, my children." Then, from deeper in the forest, another sound began. A woman humming. The Gray River woman, the same dead thing that had tried to answer C at dawn. The humming moved away through the rain. The tiger turned toward it, growled, and followed. Its footsteps faded into the jungle. Only then did my whisper sleep now. C pressed her forehead to the dirt. "Mama, are you hurt?" For a long time, there was no answer. Then Mai's voice came from just outside the leaves, soft as a hand against a child's hair. "Mothers do not hurt the same way after they die." By the 10th day, Pao could barely walk. His feet were swollen, his lips were cracked, and every few steps he leaned harder into C's side. C was not much stronger, but she kept moving because stopping felt too much like dying. They followed the smell of water downhill, through bamboo, mud, and trees that grew thinner as the land began to fall away. Near sunset, they heard voices. Real voices. Living voices. C pulled Pao behind a tree and watched as a group of Hmong refugees moved through the lower forest. There were maybe 30 of them, some barefoot, some carrying children, some carrying nothing at all because everything had already been lost. An old woman spotted C in the shadows. She did not scream. She only lifted both hands and spoke gently. "Children, come out. We are Hmong. We are also going to Thailand through the Mekong River." C stayed hidden. A man stepped forward, palms open. "We are going to the Mekong. Thailand is across." The word Thailand went through Pao like warmth. His knees bent, and he began to cry, not from fear this time, but because hope hurt almost as much as grief. The refugees took them in. Someone gave them rice water. Someone wrapped Pao's feet. Someone asked whose children they were. C answered, "Vang Moua." The old woman went still. "There is a man named Vang ahead of us," she said, "at the river camp. He has a small boy with him. He has been asking everyone for a daughter named C and a son named Pao." C's body forgot how to stand. For the first time since the ambush, she let someone else catch her. They reached the Mekong after dark. The river was wider than anything C had imagined. It did not look like water. It looked like night had fallen into the earth and begun to move. Across it, Thailand was only a black line under a blacker sky. Behind them, Laos breathed with mountains, dead bodies, ghosts, and men with guns. The refugees built rafts from bamboos. Some had big plastic bags, and some used big tree stumps. No one spoke loudly. No one wasted strength on crying. The river had already taken too many names. C put Pao on a raft tied together with rope and prayer, while C holding onto the raft inside the water, swimming to push the raft. Only the kids who did not know how to swim would be on the raft. Halfway across, fog moved over the water, low and thick. The paddlers cursed under their breath. The current pulled hard, and the raft drifted backward. Then Pao pointed behind them. "Zip." On the Laos side of the river, a woman stood on the bank. Mist curled around her feet. Her hair moved, though there was no wind. The embroidered sash around C's waist tightened, then loosened. Mai lifted one hand. C tried to swing her hand, but the old woman grabbed her wrist. "Do not call to her on the water," the old woman warned. "That is my mother," C said. "I know. She will be left behind." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "No, child. She is making sure you are not and seeing you off onto safety." Behind Mai, shadows gathered along the riverbank. Not soldiers. Not animals. Figures, thin and restless. The abandoned dead. The hungry lost. The ones with no family left to call their names. They pressed toward the river. The raft drifted backward again. Pao screamed, "Mom." The sash slipped from C's waist and flew across the water like a pale bird. It crossed the fog, crossed the dark, and landed in Mai's hands. For one moment, C saw her mother clearly. Not wounded, not broken, not afraid, beautiful, strong, still a mother. Mai tied the sash around her own waist, then turned away from the river and faced the gathering shadows. The fog closed around her. The raft lurched forward. The current released them. Thailand came toward them through the dark, while Laos disappeared behind them, carrying Mai back into the mist. On the Thai side of the river, strangers pulled everybody out of the water and from the raft. Pao collapsed into the mud. C could not feel her legs. Torches moved through the rain, and people shouted names into the darkness, hoping the river had been merciful. Then one voice broke open the night sea. She turned. Vang was running toward her with Ur in his arms. For one heartbeat, C did not believe it. Her father looked thinner, older, almost like a ghost himself. Ur's little face was pressed against his shoulder, but when he saw C, he reached both hands toward her. "Sister," Ur cried. Vang fell to his knees before he reached them. Pao stumbled into him first, then C, and then the four of them folded together in the mud, holding so tightly that none of them could breathe. For a long time, nobody spoke, just crying, holding on to each other with comfort. Then Vang looked over C's shoulder. His face changed. "Where is your mother?" C opened her mouth, but no words came out. Vang understood anyway. Something inside him seemed to collapse. He pressed his forehead against C's hair and made no sound, only non-stop tears. That was the only way he allowed himself to break, silently, where his children could feel him shaking. Later, in the refugee camp, when the children finally slept, Vang sat awake with Ur in his lap. Rain tapped against the roof. People coughed softly in the dark. Somewhere nearby, another family whispered prayers for those who had not crossed, and in other homes, some burned incense and paper throughout the night. Ur stared toward the hanging cloth at the doorway. "Mom is wet," he said. Vang froze. "What did you say?" Ur pointed with one small finger. "Nia, Mom is outside." C woke at once. The shelter had no real door, only a cloth moving in the rain wind. Beyond it, the night was gray and cold. A shadow stood outside. At first, it was only a shape. Then it became the outline of a woman. Vang slowly rose, but C grabbed his hand. "Father, don't." His voice broke. "Meh?" The cloth lifted, although there was no wind, and Mai's voice came from the rain. "Do not follow me." Vang covered his mouth with one hand. "I left you. You carried our son." "I left them. They came home, but you did not." The rain grew harder, and for one breath, C smelled her mother again. Wood smoke, rice steam, and mountain flowers crushed between warm fingers. Mai spoke softly. "Be a good father and raise our kids well, Vang." His shoulders shook as he cries, weeping for the loss of his wife, and with a trembling voice. "How?" "Alive," said Mai. You reached toward the doorway. "Nia, Mom, stay." The shadow stepped back. "I'll walk behind you now," Mai whispered. Then the cloth fell. The rain became ordinary rain again. In the morning, there were wet footprints outside the shelter. They came from the direction of the river. They stopped at the doorway. They did not leave. Years passed after that. The Moua family survived the camps, survived hunger, survived paperwork, survived the ache of starting over in a place where the mountains were only memories. C grew older. Pao grew tall. Yer forgot some things a child should not have had to remember. But C never forgot. When people asked how two children crossed the mountains alone, she gave them a smaller truth. She said she followed the sun. She said kind refugees found them. She said her father was waiting across the river. She did not tell them about the gray river woman, or the abandoned houses that whispered, or the tiger outside the roots. She did not tell them that some ghosts are not curses. Some ghosts are guardian angels, our family, our ancestors, mother, father, and promises. And every year, when the first heavy rain came, C would wake before dawn with her hand pressed against her waist, reaching for the sash she no longer had. Sometimes, in that half-dreaming hour before morning, she would hear claws scraping against wood, a tiger breathing outside, a child trembling beside her, leaves pressed tight over a hole in the earth. Then her mother's voice would whisper through the rain, "Do not move." And C would lay perfectly still, because after all those years, she could still hear her mother holding the door shut. This is a story about a mother's love after death. We hope you like the story, and please subscribe, hit hit like and follow. Thank you for your support and thank you for tuning into our stories. Some are fiction and some are based on a true event. We would really appreciate it if you could like this video, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for a new story every day.